For nearly a week, no one could reach former Arkansas State Senator Linda Collins Smith. Her phone was silent. Her family had stopped hearing from her. Friends couldn't get a response. And the longer Linda remained unreachable, the more frightening the situation became. At first, her family tried to find ordinary explanations. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she wanted some time alone. Maybe there was a problem with her phone. But Linda was known for being constantly connected. So when several days passed without a single response, her family knew something was wrong. On June 4, 2019, Linda's father, Benny, and her son, Butch, went to her home in Pocahontas, Arkansas. They weren't expecting to discover a murder. They were simply trying to find Linda, but when they arrived, they noticed something disturbing. There was a strong odor coming from underneath a tarp outside the house. At first, Benny thought perhaps an animal had died underneath it, but when Butch lifted the tarp, a swarm of flies came out. Underneath was a human body. The family immediately called 911. The woman beneath that tarp was Linda Collins Smith. She was 57 years old, and by the time investigators arrived, they were looking at what appeared to be a carefully concealed murder. But there was something else that made the case particularly strange. Linda had been afraid before she died. For months, she had reportedly told people that she believed someone wanted to kill her. She had changed the locks on her home. She kept a gun close to her bed. And she had security cameras installed around the property. Those cameras were supposed to make her feel safer. Instead, when police arrived after her disappearance, they discovered that the cameras were missing. All of them. Someone had apparently taken them down. That immediately raised a question. Who knew about the cameras, and who would have a reason to make sure investigators couldn't see what happened inside Linda's home? At the time, investigators didn't know that the answer would eventually lead them to someone Linda trusted deeply. Someone who had worked with her. Someone who had been her friend. Someone who had helped her install those very cameras. Her name was Rebecca Lynn O'Donnell, better known to people close to Linda as Becky. But before investigators could understand how Becky became the center of the case, they had to understand Linda's life. Linda was born and raised in Pocahontas, Arkansas. She came from a modest background and grew up in a family that did not have much money. But Linda eventually built a successful life. She worked in real estate. She became a mother to 2 children, Butch and Tate. And later, she married Philip Smith, an attorney and judge. The couple also became business partners. They invested in motel properties and built a business life together. Linda's life changed again when she entered politics. In 2010, she was elected to the Arkansas House of Representatives. At the time, she was a Democrat, but 1 year later, she switched parties and became a Republican. In 2014, Linda won a seat in the Arkansas Senate. She became a recognizable political figure in Arkansas and was known for her conservative positions. But political success eventually came to an end. Linda lost her Senate seat after 1 term. Still, she wasn't ready to disappear from public life. She was exploring new political opportunities and had recently traveled to Washington, D.C., hoping to find another way to continue her career. But while Linda was trying to rebuild her professional future, her personal life was becoming increasingly complicated. Her marriage to Philip had collapsed. Their divorce was bitter. The couple had disagreements over property, money, and business interests. According to Linda's son, the divorce settlement strongly favored Philip. But there was another major conflict between the former couple. Linda had accused Philip of viewing pornography on a computer connected to his work. The allegation eventually contributed to Philip losing his position as a judge and being barred from serving on the bench again. Linda also referred to the issue during the divorce proceedings. Their marriage was over. But the conflict between them was not. People close to Linda later told investigators that she was afraid of Philip. She reportedly complained about unexpected visits to her home and confrontations between them. In some situations, she wanted law enforcement present when they had to interact. She believed she needed protection. Linda also experienced serious health problems. She was eventually diagnosed with mercury poisoning and reportedly became convinced that someone might have deliberately poisoned her. She told people close to her that she suspected Philip. Whether that suspicion was justified or not, it demonstrated how frightened Linda had become. She was taking precautions. She changed the locks. She installed security cameras. She kept a firearm near her bed. And she told people that she was afraid for her life. Then, in late May 2019, Linda returned from Washington. That would be the final trip of her life. On May 28, she was seen alive. After that, something changed. Her daughter Tate tried contacting her. No response. She tried again. Still nothing. Tate knew her mother well enough to understand that this wasn't normal. Linda used her phone constantly. She was also active in her everyday business and personal life. A sudden disappearance made no sense. Tate contacted Becky O'Donnell. Becky was not simply an acquaintance. She was one of Linda's closest friends. She had worked on Linda's political campaigns. She had worked with her business. And she had helped Linda with her security system. Becky knew Linda's routine. She knew the property. She knew about the cameras. And she knew the people in Linda's life. At the time, however, nobody in the family appeared to suspect that Becky could be responsible. Instead, the family focused on finding Linda. Butch went to the house. He knocked. There was no answer. Linda's father also went to the property. Eventually, he entered through an unlocked rear door. Inside, they noticed something strange. Linda's suitcase was still there. She had recently returned from Washington, but it looked as though she hadn't even had time to properly unpack. Then they saw a dark stain on the unfinished kitchen floor. At first, it appeared that something like coffee might have spilled, but investigators would later determine that the stain was blood. Outside, the smell coming from beneath the tarp was becoming impossible to ignore. Butch lifted it, and there was his mother. Dead, her body had been outside long enough to become badly decomposed. Identification was difficult, so investigators eventually relied on dental records. The autopsy revealed that Linda had died from multiple stab wounds. She had been stabbed 6 times. Investigators believed she had been killed on May 28. That meant Linda's final hours had taken place on the same day she was last known to be alive. Now police had a murder case, but they didn't yet know who had committed it. At first, Linda's former husband looked like an obvious suspect. The divorce had been bitter. There were financial disputes. Linda had expressed fear of him, and people around her remembered her concerns. Investigators questioned Philip. He denied killing Linda. He also provided an alibi, but police couldn't immediately dismiss him simply because he claimed he wasn't there. They needed to verify everything. Meanwhile, another man connected to Linda was examined. Rendell Wallace had recently reconnected with her. The two had known each other many years earlier and had dated before Linda married Philip. After decades apart, they had started seeing each other again. That made him part of the timeline. But as investigators continued working, another person became increasingly important. Becky O'Donnell. At first, Becky was not simply a suspect. She was someone who could potentially help investigators. She was Linda's friend. She knew her. She had worked with her. And she knew the property. But investigators soon discovered something that changed everything. The security cameras that Linda had installed were missing. However, the footage had not completely disappeared. Investigators discovered that copies of the recordings had been stored. That meant the killer had made a critical mistake. The cameras could be removed, but the recordings could survive. When investigators examined the footage, they saw something shocking. Becky O'Donnell was captured at Linda's home, and the footage showed her removing security cameras. But that wasn't the worst part. The recordings showed Becky with a bloody knife. The woman who had been one of Linda's closest friends was now directly connected to the murder scene. The evidence changed the entire direction of the investigation. Becky was arrested and charged with capital murder, abuse of a corpse and tampering with physical evidence. Initially, she denied being responsible. She claimed she had been set up. She pointed investigators toward Linda's former husband. But the evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to explain away. The surveillance footage had captured her inside Linda's home. She had been removing cameras. And the evidence placed her at the scene around the time Linda was killed. Investigators then began looking at the relationship between Linda and Becky more closely. Why would a close friend kill her? What could possibly have turned their friendship into murder? Prosecutors eventually argued that money was a major part of the motive. Becky had worked with Linda in different parts of her life, including politics and business. Investigators believed financial issues had developed between the two women. Linda's family also believed Becky may have been taking money from Linda. The exact details of the financial dispute were complicated, but investigators believed Becky had reached a point where she feared being confronted or exposed. And that may have been when the relationship between the two women turned deadly. But the case became even stranger after Becky's arrest. While in jail, she was accused of attempting to arrange additional murders. According to prosecutors, Becky allegedly discussed plans to have Linda's former husband and others killed. She was accused of offering payment and other incentives to people she met while incarcerated. Those allegations added another disturbing layer to the case. The woman accused of killing Linda wasn't simply fighting to defend herself. Prosecutors claimed she was continuing to think about violence even after her arrest. But the most important development came in August 2020. After initially maintaining her innocence, Becky O'Donnell changed her plea. She admitted that she had gone to Linda's home and intentionally killed her. She also admitted hiding Linda's body. The confession brought an end to one of the most disturbing murder investigations in Arkansas. The woman Linda had trusted had become the person responsible for her death, and the security system Linda had installed to protect herself ultimately became one of the key pieces of evidence used against her killer. Becky pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. She also pleaded no contest to separate solicitation charges connected to alleged murder-for-hire plans. She was sentenced to 50 years in prison. For Linda's family, the conviction brought some measure of closure, but it could never undo what had happened. The case had begun with a missing woman. Then came the terrible discovery beneath a tarp. Then the blood inside the house. Then the missing cameras. Then the suspicion surrounding Linda's former husband. And finally, the shocking realization that the person closest to Linda could have been the one responsible. The story is especially tragic because Linda had spent months trying to protect herself. She believed danger was coming. She changed her locks. She installed cameras. She kept protection close. She warned people around her. But she apparently never expected the threat to come from someone she trusted. And perhaps the most ironic part of the entire case is that the security system Linda installed for protection ultimately helped investigators uncover the truth. The cameras disappeared, but their recordings did not. The killer tried to erase the evidence. But one overlooked digital trail remained. And that trail transformed the investigation. It turned suspicion into evidence. It exposed the person removing the cameras. And eventually, it helped investigators connect Becky O'Donnell to Linda's murder. Linda Collins Smith entered politics hoping to serve her state and later returned to Washington searching for a new opportunity. Instead, Her life ended inside her own home. Her family spent days wondering where she was. Her body was hidden outside, and the person responsible was someone who had once been trusted enough to help protect her. In the end, the case was not solved by a dramatic confession at the crime scene. It was solved piece by piece, through the timeline, through the physical evidence, through the relationships, and through a recording the killer apparently believed would never be seen. Linda had installed those cameras because she was afraid someone was watching her. She never knew that after her death, those same cameras would help investigators watch the person who killed her. And that is what makes this case so haunting. Sometimes the evidence a killer tries hardest to destroy is exactly what leads investigators to the truth. In Linda Collins Smith's case, the cameras may have disappeared, but they had already captured enough. And eventually, the truth came through. Not from a rumor, not from a theory, not from an accusation, but from the evidence left behind. Linda's story ended in tragedy, but the investigation proved one thing. A crime scene can be cleaned. A camera can be removed. A body can be hidden. But evidence has a way of surviving, and sometimes, the silent witness is the one that finally speaks.